Welcome to my channel, Delightful Stories. I'll be happy if you subscribe to my channel and like it. Enjoy watching and don't forget to leave your opinion in the comments about the story. How can you be such a stretch? I was very clear. In my opinion, the balloons should be the color of delicate lilac with herbs and sequins. And what have you put up for me here? What's the wildest tastelessness? Suzanne pointed with obvious displeasure to the poor designer at the huge heart-shaped balloons, which he and his assistants just hung from the ceiling of the fashionable restaurant. Mom, calm down, please. There is still time. There is no need to put so much pressure on people. Sophie tried to reason with the woman's daughter. Sophie patted her mother on the shoulder, but she shook her hands and turned to her child. Your wedding is in 3 weeks. 3 weeks in which we have to order your dress and attend fittings and approve menus and decorate the place accordingly. And I'm not talking about a ton of other things we have to do. I don't know how you can be so relaxed. Our image in the press for the next year depends on this event. Suzanne glanced angrily at the waiters. I said the tables should be set up in groups to give the feeling of a home social club. No, this is just unbearable. Sure, we'll fix it, said the waitress, panting, blushing with worry and endless running back and forth. Your manager could have found time to meet us, said Suzanne. Is he always in your office? Or is he afraid to talk to customers? The girl in the white blouse shrugged her shoulders. How was she to know what that nasty little man was doing? Always deducting from their bonuses and burning young waitresses with a greasy look. Mother and daughter looked at each other. If it were not for the personal acquaintance of their father and husband, a powerful businessman, with the owner of this place, they would have thought twice before agreeing to celebrate Sophie's wedding here. But the businessman offered to do in this restaurant whatever his young daughter's soul desires. And they promised to cater the festivities to the highest standard. And the restaurant has been a household name lately. During the last year, this hall had hosted various celebrities, from movie stars and pop singers to the important statesmen. In a word, to celebrate a wedding in such a restaurant was primarily prestigious. And this moment specifically for Suzanne and her daughter was decisive. Tell me, Alexa, have you washed all the dishes properly? Asked, running into the kitchen with all her legs. Mary, the waitress, who a minute ago was taking the blame for their manager in front of the rich. Yes, why? The girl who was in charge of keeping the cutlery clean answered calmly. Now, this mad woman will come and inspect our kitchen, Masha announced, nervously fixing her hair. God forbid something happens to her daughter. What if she gets poisoned by eating out of our knot? Perfect dishes. Masha mocked the rich client with the same contemptuous expression on her face as a rich woman with her hands at her sides. Alexa smiled briefly. She had only worked as a dishwasher in this restaurant for a year. But her job was what they called small, washing dishes to a shine and making sure no streaks or fingerprints were left on them. A simple job that paid enough money not to starve to death and to be able to buy at least the most modest daily necessities. Don't worry, I've handled all the plates 3 times, just in case, as Alexa nodded to her. Let her come in if she wants. We have no secrets here. The girl performed most of her duties just fine. Not once, since the previous dishwasher had been fired, had they received any complaints about the cleanliness of the dishes they used. The latter, however, did not prevent Carlos from attacking the girl regularly. He did not like the fact that she always treated him with a kind of aloofness and dignity, rather than fawning over him for a bonus, as some of his favorite waitresses did. Every time he entered the kitchen, the manager found something to reproach her for. Most of the time, he scolded her for using too much detergent, without hearing her justification that otherwise the dishes wouldn't wash because the pots and plates were greasy. Sometimes he reproached her for stealing household chemicals, threatening her with his fist and promising to check if she was a thief. Alexa, on the other hand, tolerated, kept quiet, and then cried on her way home when no one saw her. Although at work she was able to create an image of an unflappable employee, but that did not mean that she so easily endured all the nagging and insults coming at her from the manager. She had simply learned to hide her feelings, reminding herself every time that it was just a job that provided her with food and clothing. Luckily, she had a place to live. The state gave her a tiny one-room apartment on the top floor of a 3-story old house in a remote part of town. It was there that the girl could fully relax after a hard day's work and briefly distract herself from everyday worries, immersed in another interesting book. Alexa loved to read. She came to the orphanage when she was still a baby. Her teacher liked to tell her the story of how she found her on the doorstep of the orphanage. I was on shift at the time. Everyone else had gone home. It was summer vacation, Barbara told her at the time. It was dark out. It was after 1 o'clock in the morning. And then I heard someone knocking loudly on the main gate. So, of course, I immediately went down to check, see if anyone needed help. And there's only our shelter around here. I opened the door, and there was a small wicker basket, like the ones they sell berries in on the road. I look in the basket, and there you are, tiny, wrapped in a pink shirt. And on your head, you have such an unusual wreath. It looks like it's made of wildflowers, but the weave between the flowers was unusual. The knots were wound in a special way, made in the image of pagan knots of happiness. We studied your wreath for a long time. We wanted to learn this intricate way. One of the books in her little home library still held that tiny wreath of mixed wildflowers. A caregiver and a colleague had purposely saved it and given it to her when the girl graduated from the orphanage. They said it should stay with her as a memento of her possible parents. The girl sometimes carefully took the wreath in her hands and looked at it for a long time, trying to imagine who her parents were and what made them give their own daughter to an orphanage. That very evening we put you down as Alexa, her beloved educators proudly told her. Consider that this wreath gave you a name. Alexa is a strong name. It means Die Defendery is a strong name. It means even with a fight, but deservedly. She could not help smiling warmly every time she thought of it. That said, the tutor really helped her, and the girl will be grateful to her for that to the end of his days. The day came when the young couple celebrated their wedding at the Grand Leroy restaurant. The celebration was really bright and incredibly beautiful. The mother of the bride still made sure that everything in the restaurant was arranged the way she wanted. The hall was transformed from a place where the wealthy townspeople could spend their evening beautifully into a real fairy palace. There were garlands of fresh flowers all around, and dozens of balloons formed the most bizarre compositions. The huge wedding pie, in which Alexa counted at least 5 floors, proudly towered in the middle of the restaurant kitchen and waited for its moment of glory. When it was rolled out to the melodeon, Alexa quietly peeked at everything going on from the kitchen, as long as no one saw her. Mostly everyone was busy with their usual work, serving about 100 guests, who by some improbable means managed to fit into the 2 halls of the luxurious establishment. Waiters were scurrying back and forth, offering guests champagne and plates with appetizers, and a famous toastmaster from among TV presenters did not seem to stop for a minute, endlessly cracking wry jokes and dragging well-dressed men and women into more and more contests. Alexa looked at the young ones with admiration. The groom was gorgeous in his perfectly black of some expensive fabric tuxedo. He was tall and very handsome to match his rich bride. Sophie shone in a long dress, more like an evening gown than those wedding dresses the girl had hitherto seen on ordinary brides. Her gown literally shone in the exquisite half-light of the restaurant, favorably emphasizing all the advantages of its owner's figure. And the beauty's hair was gathered in a high hairstyle, decorated with real pearls and crystal. A real princess, no less. Alexa sighed bitterly. Just a little, but she still envied the bride. She herself would like to wear such a beautiful dress and celebrate a holiday of love in the company of friends and relatives, when all the attention was focused on you and your beloved adores you, and wants only one thing on this day, to make you both endlessly happy. However, the girl knew that in the near future she would definitely not see a dress, much less a groom. The last guy she dated broke her heart in the worst way, and Alexa was no longer sure whether she wanted to try to get serious with anyone again. When she and Collier had first met, he had made the most positive impression on her. A hard-working guy, worked in a computer company, smart, funny, good-looking, blue-eyed brunette. He was able to charm the shy girl. Alexa was already 20 years old at that time, and she sometimes thought about trying to create her own family with a husband and wife, and then children who would love and respect each other and their parent. The girl dreamed that she could finally become a real homemaker, and Nicholas was an excellent candidate in this regard. Alexa quickly fell in love with him, and at first their relationship developed like a fairy tale. They talked a lot, went to the movies together, or spent time at out-of-town campsites where they fished together and could play guitar for hours for each other, to the accompaniment of crackling embers in the fire. But then the fairy tale ended. The boy's mother returned from a neighboring town to see her son's bride-to-be, and here for her began a series of endless recriminations and insults. "Look at your bride, my son," sighed Viola in an exaggeratedly tragic way. "She has no taste, no style. She dresses like the last beggar. Is she right for you? My fiancée is a sensitive, loving girl. A mother. The guy stood up for her. Lack of money in our society is no longer a sentence, but for a dishwasher who graduated from the orphanage 6 months ago, the opportunity to catch such a clever and handsome boy as you, son, is a real good luck, isn't it, Alexa?" With a sneer, she turned to the poor girl. Alexa, who at that moment did not even know what to answer to such a blatant mockery of her origins, was about to cry. Vile, however, prevented her from doing so. "Don't make me cry here," she hissed venomously and dropped her own handkerchief in her lap. "That's right. And stop playing this cheap show on me. And stop playing this cheap show on me. And tell me you're pregnant with my son and you love him with all your heart." "I'm not pregnant," sobbing, Alexa said with difficulty. "But I really, really love your son. I don't care if he has money or not. I just want to be there for him forever. And I just want to find a worthy bride for my son. That's all," said the mother with a nasty smile. "Believe me, I have no personal grievances against you at all. After all, even dishwashers marry very successfully, but to their peers, janitors and cleaners. But you will not marry my son. Never. And don't even dream of it." The girl left her fiancé that day as if spat upon. She had never experienced such humiliation, not even in an orphanage, and there they are not ceremonious in their words. Nicholas tried to catch up with the girl and apologize to her for her mother's terrible behavior, but she asked him to leave her alone. Reluctantly, he let her go. It was only after this incident that he became visibly cold toward her. The young dishwasher realized that her mother had apparently succeeded in setting her son on the right path. He almost stopped calling, did not write to her in messenger messages and social networks, and then disappeared altogether. What was the girl's disappointment when, after a couple of months, she saw on his page in the social networking site a photo of the new girl. The guy's current fiancée was clearly from a wealthy family. Her clothes and well-groomed hair she could only envy. Of course, there was something unnatural about her, some artificiality of deliberately perfect body shapes. But the most important thing was that now the mother of the groom was absolutely satisfied with everything. Alexa went to the beauty's profile to see what she did for a living. It turned out that she was an ordinary model for our time. There was no indication as to what she did. However, judging by the numerous photos of her in expensive swimwear from famous brands, The beauty promoted only high-end underwear. The funniest thing is that the girl's father was a well-known industrial tycoon, so it was clear that the image of the model just a cover for the lifestyle of the so-called socialite. Alexa was insanely hurt. She closed the lid of her old laptop and bit her lip to keep from crying. And this was what Nicholas had traded her for on his mother's advice. Did he expect to get a place in the huge industrial corporation of the girl's father so much that he was willing to turn a blind eye to her obvious vulgarity and frivolity? The answers to these questions she could never know. But her heart was broken, as they call it, completely. It turns out he was just spending time with me for his souls, the girl thought to herself. And with this rich girl is ready to enter immediately into a mutually beneficial relationship. Only, what is it, I wonder, the model herself found in a guy like Nicola? Except that she was attracted to his pedigree. Nicholas had once told her that he and his mother were descendants of some famous architect who had served the king. Mentally, the girl wished the young couple love and closed the page. She tried not to think of her beloved again. But today, when she looked at the laughing newlyweds, tears involuntarily came to her throat. She turned away and hurriedly plunged back into the tons of foam and dirty porcelain. After a while, the dishwasher went out the back door and into the courtyard of the restaurant, where she often fed the scraps from the kitchen to the local stray dogs. She was always fond of animals and did what she could to help them. Sometimes she even bought food for the local shelter. "Basie Ritchie, come here. I brought you something yummy." Two large dogs had already seen their benefactress appear and immediately ran up to the girl, standing on their hind legs and putting their warm heads and wet noses under her hand. So these two were begging for food. The dogs were very clever and never wandered around the restaurant just for fun. They remembered the times at which the dishwasher went out and brought them tasty meat cuts, so they appeared near the back door exclusively in the afternoon, closer to evening. "Eat up, my good people, in good health," the girl whispered, pulling out of the bag the treat she had prepared. A few dozen yards away, the bride was just playing catch the bride's bouquet with her friend. Flushed with wine and fun, the girl climbed the several high steps leading up to the exquisitely updated photo area, then turned her back to the other girls and prepared to throw them the bouquet. "Are you girls ready?" shouted Sophie to them, anticipating the fun to come. The dishwasher shook off the dog hair and slowly walked closer to the girls. She became curious to see which one of them would catch the lucky bouquet. Yes. The crowd of maidens in matching light, mauve cocktail dresses screamed. The bride turned to her girlfriends again and winked at them, wanting to tease them. "Are you sure you're ready? Mind you, I'm only going to throw once." "Sophie, come on," one of them shouted, and they all burst out laughing together. Alexa, leaning against the stone wall of the building, watched the local golden youth having fun. At that second, the girl really regretted that she had never been able to find any real girlfriends in the orphanage. After all, even if she ever had her own wedding, she would simply have no one to invite to it because she had no friends at all, just a couple of acquaintances, and those must have left this town by now. "Okay, that's it. I'm throwing the bouquet on 1, 2, 3. Let's go." 1, the bride held out playfully. 2, get ready, girls. Get ready. Sophie froze for a moment, and then her arms fluttered sharply upward like the wings of a bird. 3. Alexa held her breath as she watched the beautiful bouquet of purple roses tied with silk ribbon soar higher and higher into the air, and then make a wide arc over all the bridesmaids and fly straight into her arms. "Oh!" she shouted, picking up the bouquet. She didn't mean to catch it, but she did. As she lowered her eyes to the delicate pink buds, she felt the air in her lungs abruptly run out. For a second, the girl literally forgot how to breathe. A nervous shiver ran through her body. Only now she noticed that the bouquet contained not only roses, but also an ornate floral arrangement of field daisies, cornflowers, and small delicate bluebells. All of these flowers were tied together with stems of field grass, which formed perfectly even squares called. Not only that, Alexa realized that the same composition she had seen in her own wreath, which was now lying safely in her home. Could this seem like a mere coincidence? The girl was by no means sure of that. "My God, girls, look at this," cried one of the bridesmaids. "I guess we're not going to get married this year. The dishwasher at the restaurant will beat us anyway." The girl laughed, except that there was something unkind sarcastic in her laughter. "Forgive me. I accidentally caught it. I didn't mean to," she said, blushing to the roots of her hair, and was about to return the bouquet to its rightful owner for another throw. But Sophie refused. "No. If you caught it, you can have it. Besides, I made it myself. I can make myself another one. It's not a problem." The ground beneath the dishwasher's feet seemed to shake. "What do you mean you made it yourself? How can that be?" I'm sorry. Are you unwell?" Sophie asked her carefully, holding the dishwasher under her elbow. It turns out that the girl did not notice how she almost fainted right in the middle of the fun and the women's crowd. "Why don't I step aside and take you to the kitchen?" the bride suggested. No, I'm fine. Thank you." She thanked him, knowing full well the shame she would suffer if she confronted the wealthy bride. Besides, Carlos was already threatening her from around the corner with his fist. Alexa apologized once more to her guests and hurried off to the back room, where she immediately splashed cold water on her face. She still had the bouquet, and now she could see it properly, especially since the guests were engrossed in dessert, and a new batch of dishes promised to arrive in her kitchen in a quarter of an hour at the earliest. She scrutinized the series of square knots once more, each one seemingly hiding some other very intricate pattern. There could be no doubt this was exactly the way her own wreath had been made. "George," cautiously asked the girl to the chef, "listen, and this family, celebrating our wedding today, who are they anyway? I mean, I understand that they are very rich people, but what exactly do they do?" George, engaged at this time red caviar, only hummed and incredulously raised his eyebrow. "What? You do not read the news at all?" "Please, I really need to know," Alexa asked him. "Let's save the usual sarcasm for next time." "Well," but the cook stretched out and deftly garnished the snack with a sprig of fresh parsley. "Here they are, giants of the media industry. Their daddy has a share in a big telecommunications network, and his wife supervises all the local art galleries and the Museum of Modern Art." "Wow," she exhaled in admiration. "Well, yes, the daughter is not easy either. She has a chain of beauty salons in several cities, something like a franchise. Here is the head office and the largest salon. In the other and smaller cities, in some places, there are just islands of manicures in shopping centers. But their fiancé, the son of the co-owner of one of the largest banks in the country, is also a match for them. In short, almost a royal family." "That's right," she sighed, and thanking the cook for the information, returned to her actual duties. In the evening, when all the guests had gone, she received another reprimand from the manager. "How dare you go out at all, knowing that our guests would be there at that time?" Carlos yelled at her. "I didn't know anything." She tried to justify herself. "I just went out to get some air to feed the dogs. And they were throwing the bouquet, and it hit me. It was an accident, I swear." "What do I need your oaths? Idiot, you almost ruined their whole day. What if she'd been trying to help you? Do you have any idea of their status, their connections? They would have flattened us with asphalt. What if, God forbid, the paparazzi had caught the bride in your company?" He shouted something else, but the girl was no longer listening. She silently swallowed her tears and cursed her fate, because of which she was forced to wash dishes for other people. Back at home, the girl returned with thoughts of the mysterious bouquet. It now stood in her room in a neat glass vase and pleased her with its freshness and unusual beauty. What if I am somehow connected with this family? The girl involuntarily indulged in a dream. But it could be, couldn't it? Whoever taught the bride how to weave these knots might as well have weaved these knots, might as well have weaved my own wreath before giving me to the orphanage in it. Alexa could not deny herself the pleasure of imagining what her life would have been like if she had turned out to be, however distant, a relative of the rich. Then she would surely have had the opportunity to study for whomever she wished, and perhaps even to start her own business. The girl fell asleep almost immediately, and all night she dreamed of a gorgeous wedding dress, crystals in her hair, and the bride's ill-fated bouquet in knots. Alexa took a long time to gather her courage, but eventually she took a chance and went to Sophie's workplace. She found the address of her beauty salon, Aphrodite, on the internet. When she arrived, she stood in front of the beautiful glass door for a few more minutes, not daring to go inside. Finally, when she was able to cross the threshold, several pairs of astonished women's eyes turned on her at once. Both the masters in the salon and their clients all looked luxurious and literally screamed with all their looks how much money they had. Alexa immediately felt uncomfortable in her plain coat and threadbare jeans, bought at last year's sale. "You wanted something, girl?" a thin voice asked one of the masters, at the same time singing along to a wealthy, middle-aged lady who had the most real necklace of gold and some semi-precious stones around her neck. "If you need anything, the cheap haircut shop is 3 doors down," said the second girl, master flapping her long, obviously false eyelashes. "You'll know it right away. There's a big yellow sign so that the economy class can see it right away from a distance." The guest did not need to know the slang of the rich people to understand that she was blatantly laughed at. However, the girls did not stop, making her feel more and more ashamed of how she looked compared to them. "If you want to know our prices, I'm sorry, I can tell you right off the bat. Your salary, I can tell you right off the bat. Your salary here is only enough to polish one single finger, and that's only colorless polish. Everything else is overboard." The girl felt that she was about to cry and was about to leave when a luxury sports car of the female type pulled up to the salon. The girl did not know much about it, but it seemed to her to be a very expensive foreign car of ripe cherry color. A second later, the owner of the car herself emerged from the interior of the car. The young girl entered her salon, and the workers immediately fell silent. "What's going on here?" she asked sternly. "Talking about whatever you want during office hours?" Alexa genuinely admired the girl, and to think they had been peers, only 20 years old. But still, she was facing the very real businesswoman, while Alexa had been deprived of even a simple opportunity to get a decent education. The girl was sad for a second, but then she remembered her parents and realized that they probably provided their daughter with the salon chain and the whole start in life. However, this did not prevent the rich heiress from behaving with dignity. "Wait, we know each other, don't we?" She noticed the guest shaking with embarrassment. "You're the girl who caught my bouquet. Your name is Alexa, isn't it?" "Yes." "Yes," the dishwasher said, stammering. "Excuse me for coming here to see you, but I really need to ask you one thing. So, what are we standing around for? Let's go to my office and talk." Alexa nodded and followed her under the indignant looks of the manicurist and hairdresser. "So, what did you want to know from me?" asked the bride again, falling into her huge leather chair. The guest hesitated for a moment before asking her main question. "I wanted to know about that bouquet. Where did you learn to make flower arrangements and garlands of wildflowers so interesting? You were very good at it. Did your parents teach you that?" The salon owner was very surprised by such an unusual question, but still answered, "Not really. My governess used to weave flowers that way. The girl's face lit up as soon as she thought of the woman. She was a true craftswoman. It was from her that I peeked this way, and the flowers from which these knots can be so well woven. I found it very original and curious. Alexa smiled and looked hopefully at the rich owner of the beauty salon. Sophie, do you know where this governess is now? Maybe she's working for someone else in town? She wrinkled her perfectly smooth forehead and then shook her head negatively. I can't tell you exactly where she's working now. I haven't seen her in a long time, but I have her home address. I still want to go and see if she's all right, but I haven't gotten around to it yet. You know business. She threw up her hands and gave the visitor another of her countless smiles, only this time a sympathetic one. I can go to her myself instead of you, as the guest suggested with enthusiasm. At the same time, I will give her your wishes and presents if you want to please your former governess. That's an idea, she agreed and gave her Emily's address. Wait a moment, I'll be right back. In a few minutes she returned, carrying 2 huge bags of cosmetics and fruit. Here, if you can give her this, I'll kiss you myself. There are vitamins and creams for the skin, and shampoos are good. Alexa did not tell the rich lady that a mature woman could use the most common products, and some of the warm clothes much more than all this cosmetic tinsel. The girl had seen the warmth with which she had told her about her governess, so she decided she shouldn't disappoint her. After all, it wasn't her fault that she had absolutely no idea how most ordinary people really live. And this Emily, Alexa's gut told her, was just that kind of ordinary. When she arrived at the address, she had a faint hope that she could talk to the woman and perhaps in this way find out the secret of her origin. But there she was, in for a huge disappointment. The woman was not at home. Alexa rang and knocked on the door for a long time before an elderly neighbor came out of the apartment next door to her. Are you here to see Emily? Young lady. So she was taken to the hospital 3 days ago. Alexa slowly put the big bags on the floor. What do you mean, like to the hospital? In a quiet voice, she asked again. What happened to her? I don't know exactly. The neighbor shrugged. I think the doctor said she had cancer, and now it seems her condition has worsened. So they took her away. God, whispered Alexa, and then asked the older woman for the address of the hospital where the woman was now. The neighbor asked her if she was a relative, and the neighbor confidently lied that she was. Her niece was her cousin. She had come from another city to visit her, and then such a nuisance. When she arrived at the hospital, she received the final blow, this time from the doctors themselves. I'm afraid you're too late, young lady. The patient slipped into a coma tonight, and we have no guarantee that she will come out of it anytime soon. What? Not even the slightest chance that she will recover? Almost crying, she asked the doctor. Who knows? The doctor threw up his hands. Life has all kinds of miracles. Maybe she will come to her senses, maybe not. Is she related to you? Alexa did not say anything, just slowly settled down on a table right there in the hallway. With despair, she wanted to tear her hair out. To think that the only thread that could lead to her past, so absurdly and abruptly cut, and did it lead anywhere at all? Or was it all just the futile fantasies of an unhappy woman, so eager to find her blood relatives? Let me give you a sedative, suggested the doctor standing nearby. He noticed that the girl was unwell. You obviously care about her condition. No, thank you. I'll just sit here for a while, shall I? She asked. Alexa had to decide what to do next. Was it worth waiting for her to wake up, or should she go back to her ordinary life? Forget the whole situation? Torn by worries and doubts, she made a difficult decision for herself and began to visit Emily from time to time, each time trying to either read or just talk to her. Alexa wanted to believe that wherever that poor woman was now, she could still hear the voice of the young dishwasher and know that she was not alone in this world and that she had somewhere to come back to. The girl herself could not leave the lonely woman like that, for she realized she no longer had any relatives left. Alexa was the only person who showed any interest in her condition. She'd become like family to her. The girl was happy to talk to her and give her light hand massages to wake up her nerve endings a little, in the faint hope that this would help the governess' condition in general. Gradually, the nurses began to perceive Alexa as a relative of the patient as well, so they were already quite relaxed about the girl's regular visits to her. However, 2 months later, when her condition had not improved dramatically, the panel of doctors made a difficult decision to put Alexa on a ventilator. "No, you can't do that," she protested as the governess's doctor told her the sad news. "I will not let you do that because it is too soon. I am sure she will come back to us." She wanted to cry, but knew that nothing could depend upon her. "Young lady, you must understand that we have kept her as long as the government funds would allow, even longer." The doctor tried to explain to her. "We should have done that a month ago when it was clear that the patient would definitely not come out of the coma. But seeing that you cared and tried to reach out to her, we agreed and prolonged her life for a little while longer. But we can no longer afford to waste such a valuable resource on her. I'm afraid you should say goodbye to your relative and let her go." Alexa shook her head stubbornly, barely holding back the lump of tears choking her at that moment. "No, I can't. Look, what if I find the money to keep Emily alive, to keep the machine connected to her? What then?" The doctor stuck his hands in his pockets and looked at the poorly dressed girl with a frown. "Private funding, of course, could make a big difference. Except," the doctor hesitated, not knowing how to put it delicately, "I'm afraid we both realize that you don't have anywhere near enough money to keep your relative on life support. For just a little while longer. It's expensive, very expensive, pardon my bluntness." She wiped her face wet from her face with the sleeve of her old sweater, and then said emphatically, "You're right, doctor. I don't have that kind of money, but I know someone who might be able to help. Please don't turn it off for at least another week. I beg you. I'll find the money and everything will be fine. I swear to you." The doctor was sympathetic to the girl's fervent speech. He was impressed by her genuine concern for the condition of a woman she hardly knew. In fact, the doctor had long known that they were not related. "All right, I'll give you 4 days of my charges," said the doctor, and checked his pocket calendar, which he always carried with him. "If in that time you manage to find sponsors and money to maintain the machine, I can get permission to follow up your patient, but only for 4 days. I can't give you more than that, I'm sorry." "Thank you, doctor." Alexa jumped up and wholeheartedly hugged the tall, elderly doctor, who from embarrassment did not even immediately know how to react to this. "Do not waste time." He gently dismissed the girl. "Every minute counts right now." "Yes, you're right." She nodded and ran out of the hospital, dialing Sophie's number as she went. "Sophie, honey, can I come to your office now? I need to talk to you right away." It was literally a matter of life and death. Sophie agreed to receive her, and in an hour the young dishwasher described to the rich heiress the gravity of her former governess's condition. Darling, you are the only one we hope for now," as the guest told her. "Please help to pay for further treatment. She was a good governess to you, almost like your own grandmother. Only better, remember, you told me yourself. She taught you how to cook and weave those knots of flowers. Don't leave her in trouble. She's been through so much, and now she's all alone. And she has absolutely no one to help her but you and me." Sophie tapped her perfectly manicured finger on the surface of the oak table in her study, and then looked at her seriously and frowned. "I just can't understand one thing." The girl was silent for a moment, and at that moment she was more afraid than anything else in the world that her rich acquaintance would refuse her and throw her out the door right away. "Why didn't you tell me about it before?" How silent she was. "So you went to my governess." You've been looking after her all this time, but you didn't even think to tell her about it. I didn't expect you to do that. I hoped you and I had begun to understand each other a little." The young dishwasher blushed with embarrassment and shame. She really did not think that girl could be offended by such a thing. "Forgive me," she said softly. "I didn't want to bother you. I can see how busy you are all the time, and you have a family and a husband. What about me? I have to go to work. That's all the fun in the world." Of course I got attached to her. I thought no one else in the world needed her. And I guess you didn't think I needed her either. Either the businesswoman raised her eyebrows in surprise. "Well, we'll talk about that later. Right now, we have to rescue my favorite governess." Guest's face shone through tears. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. You're a very good person, you know." Alexa wiped away her tears, and Sophie began to call somewhere and connect every connection she had. Finally, when everything had been arranged and the bank had promised to transfer the appropriate payment to the hospital, within 24 hours, she looked at her guest and said seriously, "Not all rich people are villains. I just want you to know that. In general, money does not affect a person's nature. If he is good at heart, no money can spoil him. Do you think my dad bought me all this stuff so I wouldn't get bored?" She circled her arm around herself, referring to the salon. "In part, of course, for that too. But not only that. My father had taught me since childhood that money should work. Our family has always valued all kinds of work, intellectual as well as physical. Our mother, though a bit feisty, is very good. She sees potential masterpieces where others might only see garbage. Can you imagine? And my father? He spent my whole childhood on business trips. He was in meetings so we could have all this stuff." "I didn't know," Alexa whispered. "I'm not trying to sound like a jerk to you." The rich heiress smiled. "I mean, a man should have his own head on his shoulders. Then he's busy, and he doesn't have to be poor. You can achieve everything with your own labor, if you believe in yourself and your work. Do you understand?" Alexa nodded, now filled with tears of joy and gratitude. "Let's go see her now." "I want to see her," resolutely said business lady. Maybe she would hear me? The girls began to regularly visit the woman who was still lying in a coma. But now at least they were not worried about her being turned off. The businesswoman arranged with the doctors that they would treat and monitor the patient's condition for as long as it took. And she would provide the material part as well. A few months later, a miracle happened. One beautiful autumn day, when the birds were singing outside the window and colorful leaves were spinning in the air, Emily finally came to her senses. The happiness of Alexa, who was at her bedside at that moment, was boundless. "Where am I?" the woman said slowly, trying to look around. "You are in the hospital," Alexa told her softly and gently took the elderly governess by the hand. "How are you feeling? I will call the doctor in a moment." "Thank you. Excuse me, but who are you?" She looked at her guest so attentively that she felt she was in a state of shock. She could not tell the reason for her strange excitement. "I am Alexa. Wait until the doctor examines you, and then I will tell you everything." Sometime later, when the patient had recovered and was receiving all necessary care, the friends risked to come to her together. Alexa prudently took a wreath and showed it to governess, asking how she knew such a rare weave. For the first couple of minutes, the woman just silently looked first at the wreath and then at Alexa, from which she just as slowly transferred her gaze to Sophie and back. She was even worried about whether her beloved governess would have a stroke when she finally whispered to them, my goodness, girls." Then she told a story that literally made the hairs on her arms stand on end. Such frankness they certainly did not expect from someone who spent most of his life devoted to raising other people's children. "I was young then. I was not yet 40 years, began Emily. "I was working as a literature teacher in one of our schools. Young, beautiful, ambitious. I thought then that one day the whole world would fall at my feet, and everyone would know what I was the teacher of the year. Yes, I really wanted to win that award back then. At the memory of the past, the eyes of the now-aged governess lit up with a special fire, the fire of former excitement and aspirations for a glamorous career. Andrew was the father of one of my pupils, the woman continued. Tall, statuesque. He started courting me right away. They came to us from some northern town, so I didn't know for a long time if he had a woman there, and he never told me anything. And then, when we were getting serious, it suddenly turned out that he was married. His wife came over and gave me such a scandal at school that I thought I'd never get out of it. As a matter of fact, it was. There was a sad haze in the governess's eyes, but both girls were intrigued. The woman rubbed her hands together as if she were cold, and then continued. Andrew left me, unable to crawl out from under the influence of his overbearing wife. They turned out to play so regularly that she would leave him for a couple of months. Then he would leave her, but one thing was constant in this couple. They were always drawn to each other like a magnet. She was a plus more than he was. And her husband, he always liked to obey. He just tried not to show it. She sighed and told him what happened next. Meanwhile, I was diagnosed with a pregnancy. 8 weeks. Then I was diagnosed with twins girls. I was so depressed then. I can't even remember. I couldn't look myself in the mirror. I kept seeing devils in my head. I was an orphan. My parents had died by then. I didn't have any other family, no one to help me. I thought I was alone with 2 children, and then they fired me from school anyway, saying I was immoral. You can't have affairs with the fathers of pupils and then have a baby with them. A bitter chuckle played on Emily's lips, and then Alexa realized with surprise that in her youth this woman must have been amazingly beautiful. And then one day when I was on another maternity ward in the hospital, some rich people came to see me. It was a childless couple who had been informed of my sorry plight. Turns out they had their own man working in gynecology. He was the one who kept track of young fools like me for the childless rich people. The girls listened in silence. They were shocked by the things the former governess was telling them. The couple offered to give me one of their future daughters. It was almost like surrogacy, except you didn't have to take any tests. They promised me a lot of money, but did I know what it would cost me back then? But I agreed because I had no other choice. And then what happened? Did you really give them your daughter? She cried and nodded. Yes, I gave them one daughter. But it didn't help me one bit. The birth was very hard and I was tormented all the time with guilt for what I had done. How could it be? My career was ruined. I didn't have a husband. And that's like shameful. And I began to feel uncontrollable anger toward my other daughter. I thought that it was her fault, but I cannot go back to school. And now I cannot build a normal life too. Because, well, who needs a 30-year-old unemployed with a breastfeeding baby? Every day my little girl cried more and more, and I got angrier and angrier. At first I just refused to feed her. I did not want to out of principle. And then I lost milk altogether. Eventually the devil crept up on me unnoticed, and one day, in a fit of what would be called today postpartum depression, I wrapped my daughter in a thin cloth, braided a wreath around her head, as my grandmother once taught me, and took my daughter to the threshold of the orphanage. The girls looked at each other. Could it be that the solution to the mystery was so close? And the storyteller, as if not noticing their reaction, continued. She had kept the stone upon her soul for years, and now it was vital that the poor woman should cast it off. God knows how I regretted it all at the time. I tried to take her out of the orphanage later, but I couldn't. They wouldn't let me, and I even started drinking because of it. But I came to my senses in time. I lived for a while on the money the rich people left me. And then I sought out the parents of my first girl and asked them to take me as a governess, just to see how my daughter was growing up in someone else's family and to be able to communicate at least that way, at least as a governess. Because no person on earth would I wish to live and see your child call a complete stranger a mother. But it was my cross, and I had borne it all these years as punishment for my young foolishness and gratuitous rage toward my own children. Only then did she raise her tear-red eyes to the girls. Sweetheart, I realize that you can never forgive me, but I hope that you will ever try to understand me and realize that sometimes we are not in control of our thoughts and feelings. Ambition can completely override us a clear view of the most precious thing we have in this life. Forgive me, girls. Forgive me, girls. Forgive me, girls, forgive me. She covered her face with her hands, and the astonished girls looked at each other again. So what is it? You and I are sisters? Sophie asked perplexedly. Kindred nodded and equally stunned Alexa in response. We are kindred sisters. She turned to the woman and hugged her tightly. Mommy, it's so good that you're awake. God, I finally found you. Don't worry, I forgave you long ago when I saw you lying here all alone in the ward. I forgave you at once. It must have been on some subconscious level that I felt as if you were my own person. Honey, my baby, my daughter, hugged me back in a touch of emotion. Emily, thank you for accepting me as I am. But I am very ashamed of you for hiding who I am for so many years. Sophie, who until that moment was sitting at a complete loss, now gently took her own mother's hand and said, cordially, thank you for telling me. Forgive me, I probably can't call you mother because I was raised by Suzanne, you know. But I'm glad I found you again. So now I have two mothers at once. Isn't that wonderful? Tears welled up on the girl's face, and she also clung to the breast of her elderly governess. It was only now that the girls noticed that they had very similar features in their appearance. Just that one, by virtue of her means and wealth of time, was much more pronounced than her modest and quiet sister. The mother made peace with her children and was on the mend with confidence. Gradually, she finally got back on her feet and, at Sophie's insistence, moved in with her and her husband in their new home. Sophie's parents did not want to hide the truth from her. She was already grown up and married, so they took the reappearance of a governess in their lives more than calmly. After all, she had looked after her for so many years. When they were not around, that she had long been considered a member of the family herself. That her daughter called the rich men her parents was a peculiarity of circumstance, nothing more. The main thing is that they all loved the girl madly, and therefore they were all one big friendly family. Alexa was already officially the new manager of one of her sister's beauty salons. The girl took a 6-month course in the capital and now confidently manages a small team of 20 people. She changed the policy of the elite establishment so that now anyone can get a manicure and a hairdo for quite tolerable money. And every guest, regardless of his financial status, first of all, is a favorite guest. Her personal life also began to improve. She began to meet George, that sarcastic but kind young man who works as a chef in the Grand Liro restaurant. They are very good together, and they are already seriously thinking about getting married, especially since the girl who is expecting her first-born kept teasing her sister about when it will finally be her turn to be a young mommy because she caught her Bouquet. The mother helps and supports her daughters in everything, still trying to atone for the mistakes of her past, but both have long forgiven her and now only ask to live peacefully and enjoy every day they spend together. The woman cries in response, and each time she says that she has never been happier in her life.